19, classification of Crown Land Reserve as operational on page 18 in your hard copy. Heidi, out of respect, and thank you very much for going and finding that. Did you want to speak to that, present that again? Well, it was asked from Councillor Bowen-Petrie.
I can do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we have a plan here, and it does actually show the RFS shed, which is down in the bottom corner here of the large parcel of land. So we have been discussing about the options of classifying it as operational.
Yep. And it's there as community at the moment,
It
if
is
I'm wrong.
listed as community at the moment, and it is a lockable shed.
Yep. Okay, Councillor Petrie, and you'd be moving another recommendation or amendment to this to take something out?
Are you putting words in my mouth, Mr.
No, I'm not. I'm just trying to help us along.
Yes,
I would never do that.
I would move that the Drake Recreation Ground, which is the first object in the table of the community classification, object ID 1978, the Drake Recreation Ground, that be moved to the operational table, please.
Do I have a seconder, please, for that? Councillor Sawyer, thank you. Councillor Bowen, do you want to speak to that?
No, just that it is clearly emergency sort of services.
Yep.
And it is a large parcel of land of which they don't use the entirety, but I think we're best to put it in emergency services now. And should the minister wish to remove some of that, then we can look at other options of either subdivision or having it part of community, whatever. But we can look at that at a later date. But for the moment, I think it is cleaner to put that in emergency because that's clearly what it is.
Councillor, without telling you, and I would never, with your amendment, would you wish to put a timetable on that it comes back to our next meeting, or? Okay.
No, because if that goes away as operational, providing the minister doesn't object, it only comes back to us if the minister objects to it.
Okay. Yep. Right. Councillor Sawyer, being the seconder, do you want to speak to the amendment? It's all good. Any other comment, councillors? Yes, Councillor Verry.
Heidi, we've got one at Liston there, or there's actually two there. I just can't find the other one at the moment. One's classified with RFS, and there's another one somewhere that's it was on the map as a park.
Apologise, councillor, as a what?
Oh, we use it as a park, but I just can't see the thing.
So you're referring to our business paper to do with operational and community, councillor?
Liston Recreation Reserve.
In which, community or operational?
It's classified community.
Yep.
Now, a question on that one, if it's classified as community, does that mean the community wants to put in for grant to actually do something on that block? Now, so what, is that in the right area? Is that classified as community in the right spot?
I'll go to, you go ahead.
Yes, it is, and we can address that in the plans of management by finding out what you'd like to have the grant for and how you want to use that area.
Did you want to comment? Fine.
The only comment in terms of Councillor Verry, that's quite correct. As we're developing the plan of management, we'll be able to address that. With the proposed amendment from Councillor Petrie, it is possibly prudent to put the lot numbers in there. Would you like me to recite those?
Oh.
I think that's appropriate, councillor, yes.
So that would make it lot 12, section 45. In deposited plan 758, 359, 9, and lot 7027. In deposited plan 105, 0644.
You happy with that, councillor Petrie? Okay. Councillors, any more comment, debate to do with the amendment? It has been moved and seconded. Councillor, do you want any closing comment? The amendment's there, councillors, all in favour? Councillor McNish, you're voting? Thank you. Against? Carried. That now becomes part of the officer's recommendation. All in favour of the recommendation? Against? Carried. Thank you, councillors. And thanks once again, Heidi, for going and doing that. Thank you very much. Okay, councillors, we're done with the development application, page 24. That'll bring us right through to page 59. It's item GOV 23/19. It's a monthly operational report for April. Can I move in a seconder, please, to deal with this? Councillor Sawyer, thank you. Seconder. Councillor Murray, and I thank you. And once again, I'll hand over to our acting CE in Terry's absence, Kylie, to present the monthly operational report.
I think I'll be happy to just take questions. I'm not sure that I can fully articulate the CE's thoughts of the last month. I didn't wish to, that should remain.
Right.
remain as-
And while saying that, we're very lucky to have staff like Kylie to hop in when Terry's away, and thank you, Kyle, for doing this today and keep our process moving along. Any questions, councillors? Comments to do with the monthly report? Councillor Very, yes?
I've got a couple.
I'll allow two.
I've got three.
Well, I'll allow two, then I'll go to someone else. Councillor, I'll come back to you, to be fair.
Okay, the Mother of Millions, that's page 83 and 85.
Yeah,
There's a fairly large area at Cullendoor Border Gates. And there's some on the side of the road which I think were in LLS property. We've never looked after it. And the other one there it covers in a paddock of about 500 acres.
right.
So I think that one is a job for our ranger.
So you're making council staff aware that that's
I'm
there,
making
councillor?
aware, yes,
Yep.
that one. And
Yep.
also at Legume, as you get into Legume in the timbered area, that's for some unknown reason a 50K zone.
Yeah,
There's quite a patch there.
right, noted.
And on page 150, go to someone else if you like, Mr.
No, no, I'm with you now, councillor.
On page 153, we're talking about the waste management with tip shops. I just don't think that it warrants a tip shop at Liston at this stage. I talked to a few from Legume and from Liston. We're not getting the quantity of, what would you say, resaleable stuff dumped at the moment, probably due to drought and due to the fact a few of our affluent people have moved on to,
Like the way that you refer to them, councillor.
well, when you sell it's probably rape.
That's good. That's good. Anyway, that'll be noted, correct, Kyle? And the staff will work with that and do their sums. Councillor, any other questions, comments to do with the monthly report? Councillor I'll go to you, Councillor Rogan, and I'll come back to you, Councillor Bronwyn.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just one, hopefully quick one, to do with, because I know Paul's in the background over there, to do with finance. It's page 71.
Yep.
Just on the emerging issues and risks in the little comments down the bottom, there's something there that sort of grabbed my attention. That historical matter to do with the outstanding grant acquittals. So I'm just wondering whether, obviously that's under emerging risk, but how much of a risk is that really? Because it seems to me that there's sort of things that should be acquitted fairly too sweet. They should be done on time.
Would it sit, and I'll ask for your advice, Colin, and please respect what I'm going to offer, councillor, would it be more appropriate when Paul's here to present his financial report for him to deal with that? Are you happy with that, Paul? You happy with that, councillor? Yeah, and we'll bring that up then. It'll fit in there somewhere. Norm, I'm trying to rush you through. I think it's a bit more appropriate because Paul will be up in the seat then after he's rubbed down and ready to run on. Okay. Any other? Councillor Bronwyn, you've indicated.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Two questions and a comment. Comment on page 23 regarding the web design, just to reaffirm my congratulations with how that is progressing. It's something I've been pushing for several years, as you know.
Thank you, councillor.
My two questions. Page 17. Council advised via the Mayor 26th of April that the Bruxner Way is one of 18 roads to be returned to RMS control.
Yep.
When does that look like happening, and what happens to that money that was set aside, reserved
Good question.
for that corner?
Thank you, councillor, for raising that. I'll have correspondence which I shared with councillor Tom Peters. I wrote to the newly appointed minister to deal with that very topic. It was raised last Friday at Warwick at our Road Alliance, Bruxner Way Road Alliance meeting. The answer, I don't know. Councillor, we're waiting for a reply from him to share with the council that a member for Northern Tablelands, Miss Adam Marshall, where it all started, did address Inverloch Council last month and indicated in his address to that council, which was recorded, that Brookston Way would be one of the roads that is brought back on, and they are to be brought back on as they were, and it will be a highway. Nothing's confirmed yet, but he's let it out of the bag, but nothing confirmed. So all I was doing was following it up on behalf of our council and as chairperson of the Brookston Way Alliance Group. So I can't give you an answer. Yeah, but we'll keep pursuing that, councillor,
Thank you.
because it has been mentioned that it will be there and it's appropriate that it is.
Very good.
Yep.
The other one was, I think Andre wanted to add.
I apologise, Andre.
Yeah, through you, Mr Mayor. In relation to the money that's left in
Thank
reserve,
you.
right,
Thank
there's something like 670,000 that's been spoken about in the past, and what council is looking to do is basically use those funds up very early in the next financial year in improving some of the, I suppose, sight distance safety issues with some of the bends, the reverse curves that are in, for a couple of kilometres
Yep.
from the intersection
To Browns
with the
Creek, yep.
highway there. So there's been Bob Rogan, councillor, and myself and Terry. We've had a look at it. I'm working with another engineer to put together a scope of work. We have that. We're probably going to be in a position where come next week, I would suggest to you that scope of work and an estimate has been prepared, and it might well, just if it's okay with you, just float that around to the councillors, just flick it around to you for comment. And it's something that will probably need to be put into next year's operational plan by way of, some comment at the QBR, next QBR. But we would like to get your feedback, certainly, on what we're preparing to do or proposing to do with that money.
Any improvements are good, and I think that's a really good thing to do, personally, Andre, because the money here going way back, and when it was handed back over, this, God bless them, and that money was allocated for the rest of that road's life for us. It'd be wise to spend money and then have the government take back over the care of it. It'd be fantastic, but it's one of those watch and see, but it is indicated that will be one of them. Councillor, you indicated you do have another question.
Yeah, it was to do with sales, and I've lost the page, but it doesn't need the page. I was just wondering how we were going with, like we obviously resolved not to proceed with the current plan for the truck wash as is. There'd been a comment on the day by David, the engineer, saying that we needed we're going to put in place a vehicle wash bay at the depot. I was just wondering what that is and how much that was going to cost and where that funding was coming from, and whether there was any advance in getting a cost on roofing the sale yard.
A cost on moving the sale yards? Oh, roofing, thank you. Sorry, councillor.
Cost of moving it.
Yeah. You're right. Take a moment. It must be sitting in God, Councillor Peters, order, please. Now we're all getting back on track. We all settled?
Okay, through you, Mr Mayor, regarding the...
Thank you, Andre.
First question regarding the wash bay at the depot. There has been an item in the operational plan going back several years before I came. So, and it had to do with when council sold some land
Yes.
down at the depot to its neighbour.
Yep.
We did have a wash bay down there, but the wash bay that we had was part of that land that was sold. So bottom line is, at this point in time, council doesn't have its own wash bay down at the depot, and there still is a requirement to put something down there. So that's where that's at. And with regards to the wash bay in general, or I should say probably the wash bay is something that's going to be, or when I say wash bay, the truck wash is something that's still being investigated. And with regards to sort of any sort of roofing over the sale yards, I'm not aware of any investigation being done on that. The only investigation I was aware of was more to do with the bigger picture of where else could we put a truck wash and what are the options, and that was something to be brought back to council by way of a workshop.
Thank you. Councillors, any other questions, comment to do with the operational report to staff? You want another go, Councillor Very? You did have one more, and I did allow that. Thank you.
It was also interesting to note the number of complaints just outweighed the number of compliments.
To do with what, councillor?
Oh, just general. It just.
Oh,
Yeah,
right,
it's
the
just-
whole box, yep.
Yeah. Okay, now, with the water usage, I've had a couple of suggestions given to me. One is we should put one of those flashing signs like Stanthorpe Scott on the inlet so to Tenterfield.
Yep.
But the other thing, I don't know where I got this one, whether it was Arts Northwest or somewhere, but there was some really excellent advertising done, I think it was in California, and you possibly quite easy could get a copy of the ads that went on TV. It'd have to be done through the Joint Organisation of Councils about water usage.
Yep.
And they were extremely effective. They cut water use, I don't know what percentage, but it was something like 50%, I think.
Yep.
I'm not sure you want to cut 50% here, but it was very effective. The advertising was a TV ad.
Yep.
It was, I don't know how you describe the ad, probably risque or something like that.
It's a
but-
bit like Tamworth have got and I know you don't get it, they've got an ad on, which I think is great, is to do with a glass of water and that, to do
Yeah.
with the water restrictions. It's pretty effective.
Yeah.
Councillor, I'll offer you to, because we have a JO meeting next Monday out at Inverell. If you could give me some documentation, I'm happy to take that as a late item.
Unfortunately, the only thing I've got is just what I wrote down there. I don't
Okay.
know where the ad come from, but it'd be worthwhile talking to the JO just about a joint advertising
Yep.
campaign.
Happy to. And I'll note that down to take out there as a late addendum for that meeting. Okay, any other questions, councillors, to do with the monthly report? I do commend staff on the outstanding job they do. It's great information for us as a council. Councillors' office recommendations there, all happy to receive and note. Against, carried. Move on to page 60, councillors. It's item GOV 24/19, executive positions Murray-Darling Association. Can I move in a second to deal with this item, please? Councillor Sawyer, thank you. Seconded, Councillor Rogan, Councillor Forbes, I thank you. I hand over to you, Kyle, to present this report, please.
So thank you there. We've got a officer's recommendation that they endorse the nomination of council's delegates, Deputy Mayor, Councillor Greg Sawyer and Councillor Donald Forbes for the positions of Chair or Executive Committee Member of the Murray-Darling Association Region 11. And 2, to note the nominations to be lodged with the returning officer on the appropriate nomination form by 5 p.m. on Friday, 3rd of June, for determination at the annual general meeting to be held on the 14th of June in Moree.
Questions, comments to do with it? I do commend both councillors, our Deputy Mayor and Councillor Forbes, for putting their hand up to be on the exec. It is important, especially in the climate that we're living in at the moment. So I do commend you for doing that and all the hard work you put into that. Hopefully I can get out that meeting with you on that day, so it'd be great. Could be. It's a,
No, not that one.
no, not then. Councillor, yes?
No, I was just wondering with the recommendations, so they're both putting their hands up and how big the committee was, that was all, I was just wondering.
I think you both, correct me if I'm wrong. Councillor, you are on the exec, both are on the executive now, yeah. Yeah,
The current term will expire at the AGM,
yep,
and this process is formalising the ad hoc arrangements that occurred when we actually got appointed, because it was in this very room,
yep,
and it was the old
yep,
football club committee meeting. Who wants
Yep.
to go on the committee? And
yep,
so we finished up with more than we really needed.
yep,
So this is a defined process that probably came out of the strategic planning, where they said they wanted to reshape
Yep.
executives
Yep.
so that the actual delegates were nominated by their councils.
Yep.
So that resolution, if it's passed now, is forwarded through to the Murray-Darling Association saying that Tenterfield Shire Council endorses these two people who must nominate ourselves and get our own forms
Yep.
in, but you are aware that we are nominating to represent Tenterfield Shire, and
Yep.
that's refining the process.
Thank you, councillor, for those comments. I do wish you well, as I said. Councillors, the officer's recommendations there, all happy to receive and note. Against, carried. Councillors, we move on to page 64 in your hard copy.
Can you get Barry?
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, Barry's there? Yep, very good.
Front and centre, Bass. We're dealing with item GOV 25/19, amendment to human resources policy. Can I move in a second to deal with this item, please? Councillor Petrie, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Varian, I thank you. And I do welcome to our meeting Mr. Barry Frew. Welcome, Barry. And I would ask you to present this item, if you would, please.
refer to the workshop that we had where we initiated this and described the reasoning behind it. The summary is that the purpose of the report is to seek Council's adoption of amended human resources policies to reflect current organisation design and best practice. In examining the existing policies, many of them are found to actually repeat the law. And there is little sense in having a policy if you have to comply with the law. So these policies basically say that council requires, it will comply with the law, will comply with the award and any other issue by legislation that we're required to comply with. So in examining the policies, we have found that there are a series of them that were basically procedural matters. I use as an example the very first one, procedural or legal matters. The annual leave policy basically repeats what it says in the award. And there's also annual leave legislation. So it's basically an issue that should be procedural only, not really a policy matter. And the creation of an employee relations policy, as you will see, picks up all of these items, which are items A through Y on your first sheet, and then following on to CC. It picks up those items and says, well, you know, these are items that reflect either legislation to be complied with. So our employee relations policy mentions all of these so that they don't disappear, but they re-emerge as a procedural matter. You will notice that there are some that will be of interest, but again, for instance, another example that I use, there is a new employee induction and probation policy. Well, that is again a procedure that we adopt, and it is part of the process, and we say it's part of our employee relations policy in terms of dealing with new employees. Other examples, we mentioned first aid policy. Again, first aid is a requirement under the award. There is a provision for recognition of first aid officers. And again, in the Workplace Health and Safety Act, there is a provision there. So again, it is not necessary to have a policy that basically repeats a law. Employment screening is again another matter that must be undertaken as a matter of course. ICAC has a requirement nowadays that suggests to council that they thoroughly screen people before they're placed on staff, and we've introduced that in another policy that we refer to a little bit later in terms of the volunteer policy, that we're required to properly screen our volunteers. So in introducing this particular change or updating of the policies or amending of the policies, the issues are to rescind those or revoke those which are basically legal requirements, to refer to them again without having them disappeared in a new policy called an employee relations policy, and then to codify a series of policies or summarise policies which are overarching. For instance, the leave policy combines all our leave. The employee relations policy combines all of those items that are mentioned in the revocation. Recruitment and selection policy is updated. That particular policy, when it was first written and is approved at the moment, is really purely and simply an equity and diversity policy. It just refers to anti-discrimination and says we won't discriminate against people, when a recruitment policy and selection policy should deal with using current techniques in recruiting staff and reflecting best practice. Another policy is the volunteers policy. Again, as I've mentioned, in that we are suggesting that we tighten those requirements and make sure that we train people who are volunteers in the code of conduct, knowing that they represent council, and if a volunteer is required to handle cash, that we do a basic security check to make sure that there is nothing untoward there. The salary system updates how that was expressed in the past. It doesn't change the system as such. We have been upgrading the system and will have completed that by the end of this year, this financial year. Succession planning picks up on the policies there that was there, but clarifies that. The workforce development policy, again, it's really about workforce development rather than it was expressed before as organisation development. And the light motor vehicle policy clears up some operational matters that were involved there. So that's my summary in introducing the recommendation that we amend the policies as put forward.
Thank you, Barry. Councillors, any questions to Barry to do with the report? Councillor Bronwyn, yes?
Thanks, Peter. So in the start there, where it talks about the leave policy, and it says council employees, they get 4 weeks annual leave, as well as providing for whatever under the award, but it doesn't detail how many. So I presume if a staff person wants to know what their entitlement is for sick leave, carers leave, etc., they've got to go to the award. So it's not just listed there for them. The other thing is, I just thought it would have been easier to just have it listed. Anyhow, but then the next 3 pages are all to do with domestic violence leave. Is that because it's not in the award?
Barry, yeah, please.
Sorry.
Thanks, mate.
Domestic violence leave is referred to in the law, in the award, but it is not as detailed as this particular statement is. It is dealt with in the award as staff being able to seek domestic violence leave. This particular expression more clearly sets out the conditions that are involved. It, for instance, it refers to the need to get evidence that it is required, for instance, evidence from about AVOs, and there's a series of them outlined there. So it's a more detailed approach to domestic violence leave. It is a matter that's in award discussions, I guess, at the moment that are due to start next year to be more definitive about it, but councils have been asked to be more progressive and to make note of these points.
So is the award 10 days in the award?
No, the award doesn't specify the period. It's open.
So therefore, what's proposed here is that there's 10 days leave, which is basically 2 and a bit weeks with your 9-day fortnight, every year for domestic violence, either for a person who's impacted or to support a different person who's experiencing family and domestic violence. I'm just wondering where you got to the 10 days, and is there anything more definitive on who this person is? Is it a relative, or is it a mere acquaintance, or what?
Principally, it's a support person. The 10 days is the suggested amount that councils are being asked to consider. It again seems to be potentially an ongoing thing, but it has to be, as I've mentioned, the subject of being able to approve that the circumstances exist. So hence it's referred to in the award as a form of compassionate leave, so that the employer is expected to be compassionate under the circumstances. The support person is basically something that within the community is considered to be traditional. For instance, whenever we have a grievance that's lodged here, we invite support people to do it. Now, this is a slightly different category in that it could be somebody who's has a relative that's going through a serious time and is required to give them support. We do that does occur, and that's the provision here is to at least afford somebody who's probably distracted in the workplace because their relative is under some pressure because of domestic violence, to give them some support. But again, it has to be proven that the necessity exists.
Peter, so how many bereavement days is a person entitled to a year?
Bereavement days, again, is a matter under the award that really refers to council's ability to approve bereavement leave. It doesn't, and Sue might be able to assist here, it doesn't actually specify the particular amounts for each occasion. like mother, sister, brother, friend and so on.
Specifies how many days per certain relation.
Yes.
It doesn't say that you're only allowed to have 6, you might have 6 relatives.
Yeah, so it's not capped at one time, it's to do with the nature of the relationship. You get more bereavement leave for a very close relative such as a partner than you would get for a long-lost uncle.
So in that case, this is very definitive. It's 10 days. It may be a third, second cousin who needs support rather than a sister or a brother or a mother, father, whatever.
That could be the way.
So, I mean, are we better off not stipulating 10 days and leave it more flexible in relation to the situation that's relevant at the time, such as the bereavement leave? I mean, I just think it's a terrible sad indictment on our society that we're enabling staff to have the equivalent of half their annual holiday leave. It's a very negative connotation. I think it's admirable that we are supporting staff in that sphere, but at the same time, you don't want to, and the word's not encourage, but you don't want to, I think there has to be some perspective here.
The question of whether you should or shouldn't cap the leave, it does provide guidance to have some sort of cap on it. I would think that there's a provision in the award for special leave, which allows some ability for the council to provide some additional special leave if the situation becomes extremely serious. For instance, if it's a question of somebody who's on domestic violence leave and a few more days are needed, it can go to the special leave considerations under the award. But invariably, it's useful to have a cap on things that so that people know it doesn't get out of hand. It's very difficult, I guess, to, and I see where you're coming from in terms of the support person in particular. It's it adds if you start to put in the levels, and this would be possible, but the levels to which we would go in terms of the nature of the relationship of the support that's involved, as you suggest, that we would be perhaps more willing to provide more concessions to for domestic violence support to a close relative than to a distant relative. But I think that possibly complicates the basis of it, which is purely and simply providing somebody with support who's undergoing this very traumatic situation. Under a lot of circumstances, the support should principally be coming from those who are specialists in the item in the community, rather than necessarily a support person. It is a matter oftentimes for professionals in the community services field to provide these sorts of supports for people that are undergoing this situation. But there are times where an individual person might prefer some family or close relative support other than seeking an institutional support. As you know, in a number of communities, there are refuges for people undergoing this sort of domestic violence situation where they're behind iron bars, basically. But there are some that don't want to go down that track.
That's not what I'm getting. What about that is the person. Sorry, if the person is absolutely, if you're a battered wife, husband, whatever, because it can work both ways. It's not all about women being battered by men, unfortunately, which you always see in the media. I think it's very unfair because it happens both ways. Absolutely, they would want a family member, say, to look after their kids or whatever, rather than have those kids put in institutional care or foster care or whatever. But it just says a person. It could be a mere acquaintance. I mean, there's nothing here that gives our human resources or our CE or someone to have any judgment to yes to do, yeah.
I mean, certainly we could amend how it's written to reflect that, but oftentimes the support person may not be a relative, it may be a very close friend. And that's where it becomes difficult to define people.
Is there any other questions to Barry to do with the policies we're dealing with? No? Okay, councillors?
Before we proceed,
Yes, of course.
there's one slight typo
Yep.
in the leave policy.
Yep.
You amended policies to be adopted, and that typo is in item 4, accountability, roles and responsibilities.
Yep.
And the third dot point reads, RDO's being utilised. It should read, RDO's being utilised are taken to address unplanned leave requirements before other leave is utilised. It's just a typo. It should have been being. In other words, it requires the RDO to be used before other leave is used.
Not being.
Being.
Okay.
40 typos. Are we able to pass it and I can pass them on? There's missing words. There's, like in that D I just spoke, it says in addition and employee instead of an employee. There's that one that Barry's just referred to. There's the recruitment and selection policy. Technical council will provide a high standards of leave. This doesn't, can't have an R there.
Councillor?
Can I provide those later and this will
Yes,
still
we
be?
can, and they will be
accepted?
addressed. And thank you for
Thank you.
noting them, councillor. Okay. Barry, thank you for your presentation of the report and for making councillor aware of the typo, and obviously not the only one. Knowing we worked through councillor Petrie with that. And so councillors, the report officer's recommendation there. All happy to receive a note? Against? Carried. Councillors, page 69. It's item GOV 26/19, Revenue New South Wales invoices with significant increase, 2019-20 Emergency Services Levy. Could I have a move and a second to deal with this one, please? Councillor Sawyer, thank you. And second by Councillor Tom Peters, and I thank you. And I hand over to Corey to present this report.
More than happy to make some comments on this one. I'm sure that most people are aware it's been a fairly topical one across the local government industry in New South Wales, and the CEO asked me to pass on as well his absolute dismay that Tamworth has been denied their rate rise under IPART for lack of community consultation, and yet he's got a bill of 24% when they were seeking about 10. So, as I said, I think that's one of the primary concerns with this report has been the amount of consultation and obviously the financial impost on councils, which they really didn't see coming. So there's a series of recommendations there. Those recommendations are obviously an amalgam of council's position, being recommendation 1, that we only pay the 2018-19 emergency services levy plus the 2.7%. With the total maximum payment. Actually, that is incorrect. Let me just check that. So that is the primary one, that we actually pay the last year's account, which last year's instalment amount is actually $72,624. No, so in item 1, pay the 18-19 emergency services levy. Oh, sorry, it's the total quantum. I apologise. No, I apologise. It was instalments I was looking at. That is correct, Nolan. It's 90,000 is this year's quarterly levy instead of 78. With a total maximum payment of 298,343 for the 2019-20 year, equivalent to the state government imposed rate cap on local government via quarterly instalment, unless the New South Wales government fund the shortfall as a result of the advocacy efforts by the sector. So you'll be aware that that's the primary advocacy at this point in time, is to actually defer any increased payments this year until such time as councils are engaged to work those items out. Yep. Then when we go down to 2, 3 and 4, they primarily reflect the requests that have been made by LGNSW for advocacy within that particular area. And of course, the last item, F, is to forward a copy to Local Government New South Wales for them to continue their advocacy.
Thank you, Collie. Any questions to Collie to do with the report? Councillor Rogan?
Thank you. Kylie, on page 70 of the council advocacy actions undertaken, does that mean that rights to the Premier call upon? So is that correct? Is it undertaken already? Or to be undertaken?
I think it's a little bit of both in terms of the report. So I think there's been some advocacy undertaken across the sector, but obviously we need to do more, and we haven't included those in our annual budgets and consulted with our community, other than over the last couple of weeks where the media has come out around it.
Councillor, to share with you, and I hope you get the same email that I do from Local Government New South Wales from our President Linda, to be supportive. Could have done it in a mayoral minute. I was happy with this report to replace that, because it pulls out, it's fairly long-winded sort of mayoral minute. It pulls a lot of that out of this. Next week at the country mayors, the newly appointed local government minister Hancock, his first cab off the rank to address the country mayors, and I am sure that first question will be this, and to sit down and say, it's one of those, what's this space?
Thank you. And so are the JOs involved in the advocacy as a group? Because that really doesn't get mentioned there. So.
You know, good question, and we'll be taking that forward next Monday at our JO meeting, and thank you for raising that. That's what because that's exactly what the JO should be used for. Once again, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bronwyn, you've indicated.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Clearly this is said because of the alteration in the Act to allow for presumptive compensation for emergency services people for certain cancers.
Yeah.
What I'm wondering is, it includes breast cancer, prostate cancer, for instance. So, which are as we know, the most prevalent cancers in men and women.
Yep.
If you're a bush firefighter and you get prostate cancer or breast cancer, is there an automatic link back to this compensation fund, or do you have to prove the link?
I would think,
I mean,
I'm no expert, I think you'd have to prove something. I don't know.
because they're expecting $160 million increased for the current year. So, I just don't quite understand how they're going to make this, and I thought maybe our staff might be able to assist, because just say, lots of local fellows who've been bushfirefighters and got prostate cancer, and, if I rock up with breast cancer, I've been a firefighter for 33 years, does that mean, okay, cool, I'll just go and apply to this? Or how on earth does one, as a firefighter or in the rural fire service, how do you provide that link for them to then say this is going to cost us this much extra?
You've raised a really good point, but on a personal view, I agree in a way, because they're obviously, from the come forward with this huge increase, there must be some evidence there, prior evidence that this has been happening. That's the only answer I can give. Apart from that, I've got no idea.
With the foam stuff around those airports and things, and you do have a cancer clusters of specific cancers. I'm just wondering how, I just thought our staff might be able to help explain how they've achieved these specific ones that have been written and the timeframes, considering some of them are unfortunately a common cancer.
Yeah. Kylie, some comment?
No, I think you raise a very good point, and I certainly haven't seen anything about how that will be applied. And of course, that's the question that we've got to factor in there about how much it's going to cost, with very scant detail in terms of the consultation that we've had to date as to whether or not that figure is even reasonable, which is part of the ongoing concern.
Yeah. And Council, I'm happy to take that forward as a question next week in Sydney. Happy to. Yeah. But any other questions to do with the report, councillors? The officer's recommendations there, Council? Everyone happy to pass? Thank you. Councillors, move on to page. Sorry.
Operational plan for Paul as well.
Yes. Councillors, move on to page 83. To do with our quarterly budget review statement. It's item GOV 27/19. Can I move in a second here, please? Councillor Murray, thank you. Seconder, please. Councillor Very, thank you. And as always, it's good to welcome our Finance Manager, Mr. Paul Della. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And I'll hand over to you.
Okay.
Just to do, if I can just now, with my offer to Councillor Rogan with that question, Paul, when would be comfortable, what report would you like to put that into?
I'm happy to do it at any time, Mr Mayor. I can do it right now.
Yeah, if you want, you happy with that, councillor Rogan? Yep.
Yeah.
So councillors, just so we all can follow us to do with the question from the monthly operational report, what was the page again, councillor?
Page 71.
71. Thank you, Paul.
And thank you for the question through you, Mr Mayor. Yes, we are currently working through those outstanding claims at the moment. They do take a little bit of time each, going back through some historical records and so on. But we have made some good progress even in the last few days. I've signed off on a few more of those. So definitely by the end of this financial year, they'll all be caught up and up to date.
Happy with that, councillor?
Mr Mayor, of course, but I'm just wondering whether, because normally when you're dealing with government grants, isn't there sort of penalties? So how do we stand there? Is there any threat of being penalised and having to give money back because we didn't acquit them and that sort of thing? That's the basis of the question.
Once again, through you, Mr Mayor, no, there's no talk of any of that from the RMS, and we're just dealing with it. I think there's probably been issues on both sides that have caused these not to have been done in the past, so they're giving some leeway to catch up.
Yep. Thank you, councillor. Okay, Paul.
Okay, once again through you, Mr Mayor, this is regarding the adoption of the March or the third quarterly budget review. And as I alluded to at the last time we discussed the quarterly budget review, this has seen an improvement in council's financial position, predominantly due to receiving a number of grants and just so you're aware, we originally budgeted for an operating surplus of 5.277 million. We revised that downward in the September quarter budget review, and then in December we saw it rise up to 9.27 million. Now we're seeing an improvement up to 11.898 million, including capital grants, and 1.630 excluding capital grants. So it's a sound financial position, I would suggest. In terms of some of the key matters, in terms of our income, as I mentioned, we're receiving some extra grant money, which is fantastic. And there's $5 million worth of variations there in terms of income. And in terms of our expenditure, there's a few items there. Co-contribution to Match Some Youth Week funding, some Drought Communities funding expenditure, and then we've just moved some money around to fund some additional costs from some savings, and also transferred 498,000 from our reserve funds to for some regional road rock grant maintenance that was carried forward from last year. In terms of our capital expenditure, we're seeing an increase in that of about 2.722 million. That's mainly once again due to capital funded projects. In terms of, we may well end up in an even better position than this because depends on the timing of the receipt of some of the Drought Communities funding. If we acquit some of that earlier than June, we might get the final payment for that this financial year rather than next financial year. So I haven't factored that in yet, but we'll see how that goes. But all in all, it's looking quite good at the moment from a financial perspective.
Thank you, Paul. Questions to our finance manager to do with the report, councillors? No? Report's there? I apologise. Councillor Rogan.
Just a quick one, through you, Mr Mayor.
By all means, councillor.
Just the 154K on the bushfire events, is that likely to be reimbursed in time to improve the bottom line? And who reimburses that? Is that the state government?
Yes, through you again, Mr Mayor. Yes, we will get that this financial year, and I factored that into this quarterly budget review, both the income and the additional cost that we incurred as a result of those events.
Thank you, councillor, for the question. Councillor's officer's recommendations there. All happy to receive a note? Against? Carried? Thank you. Councillors, move on to page 97 in your hard copy in your agenda. Finance Council, April 2019, it's item GOV 28/19, Moving to seconder here, please. Councillor Berry, thank you. Seconder, please. Councillor Rogan, and I thank you. And once again, I hand over to our Manager of Finance and Technology, Mr. Paul Della.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and through you, you'll note